Happily divorced people of Reddit, when did you realize your marriage was over and it was time to file? When I stopped being angry or hurt about angering and hurtful things, I realized I didn't care anymore, and it was over. When I realized that no matter how much I compromised on matters, she never budged on anything, and when I decided to see a counselor because I thought there might be something wrong with me, and after a few sessions, she told me it sounded like I was in an abusive relationship, that was an eye-opener. This happened to me as well. My emotionally abusive ex insisted that I needed therapy, but after a few sessions the therapist told me that I was perfectly fine and that I was being manipulated and emotionally abused. I left her pretty soon after that when she flipped out on me for getting her the wrong birthday present. I came home from work one night and she told me she was pregnant, but there was no joy in her eyes, just the please don't be mad look. I asked why she is acting weird and she told me it wasn't mine. I got a lawyer within a week. Got to hand it to her. At least she told you. Not everyone has that courage. When we realized we were living two separate lives and there really wasn't a joint one, aside from the kids. Our divorce strategy, keep it easy on the kids. They stayed in the house. We rented an apartment nearby and we swapped back and forth every few days. They saw both of us a lot and saw we could get along, cooperate even if we weren't going to stay married. Look at the end game, moving ahead, and not the past, anger, guilt, etc. Keeps you cool instead of fighting. Try not to give money to lawyers. Find ones that specialize in mediation and doing the paperwork. Every time there is an issue, sit down and say, we can let the lawyers decide and take all of the money, or we can work it out and keep the money for ourselves. A divorce can cost $200k, $50k, or less than $10k. Ours was the last. And a bonus, we still get along socially, we didn't need to split up the friends, etc. When we both realized that if we had to go back and do it all over again, we wouldn't have gotten married. Many of our issues were probably fixable or could have been mitigated, but when she said she wouldn't do it over again and I realized I felt the same way, that was pretty much it. We were fighting, and she knocked a stool over. Actually, she picked it up and was going to throw it at me, but changed her mind. She put the stool down and it fell over. My 3-year-old son came in, righted the stool, and screamed, "Don't knock over my stool." We both realized that we weren't raising him properly. We would have stayed together probably for a long time if we didn't have kids, but we didn't want to frick them all up more. So we divorced. We're friends now. Great friends. Sometimes we live together, different rooms like roommates. This story has the best ending in this thread. Glad you two could work it all out like grown-ups. My ex and I were arguing all the time. We were both insecure, both dependent, and both unfulfilled for different reasons. I thought by taking things slowly, year-long relationship, 3-year engagement, that the love would come. I knew I appreciated her. Lord knows she was the perfect wife, but I kept feeling like we were just friends. Because I just wasn't feeling it. She felt unfulfilled by my lack of passion. At some point during an argument, we both stopped and looked at each other. It was as if, at the very same moment, we realized that we weren't in love. She had the courage to say it out loud even though I didn't. She said, "I think we both know where this is headed." Of course, I knew it too. But those words were so heavy that my mouth couldn't say them. All I could muster was, "Yeah, I guess so." So we split up. The first year was difficult, although we stayed married on paper. I guess it was just to be sure. After a second year, I reached out to her and asked if we could file. We were much better by then and actually friendly toward each other. We filed on our own, without a lawyer, for $78 in court costs. We became friends through it all and eventually helped each other with dating advice. I think we kept a really great friendship for 5 more years until she remarried, and we decided out of respect for her new marriage that we'd put our friendship on the shelf. We haven't spoken since, and last I heard, she was still married to the same guy. She's a wonderful woman and the perfect wife, in my opinion. She just wasn't the perfect wife for me, and I wasn't the right man for her. That's probably the saddest one I've read here, for some reason. When I realized that she was actually incapable of compromise, that no time in our 20-year history had she ever done so, and that she never would. My ex was the same way, even about little things. I don't think I ever got to pick the movie we watched together. Woke up after a horrible accident with my back broken in multiple places and at the time was temporarily paralyzed. At the time we didn't know whether it was permanent or temporary. Company CEO asked if he wanted him to call my wife. I said no. I didn't tell her for a week. When I got home, it wasn't the injury she was upset about, it was the fact she would have to work to pick up the slack from me being down and out. We separated a week later. When a thought of suicide briefly crossed my mind, I've never had issues with depression before or since, so that was a wake-up call. I had one of those moments of clarity where saw two paths in front of me. One was get divorced, deal with all that bullcrap and have at least a snowball's chance in heck of being happy someday. The other was stay where I was, keep becoming more and more depressed and eventually put my kids through something even worse than a divorce. I chose wisely. Glad to still see you here, mate. I knew about 6 months after the wedding that I had made a huge mistake. I stuck it out for a long time though. We were divorced after 12 years. In hindsight, the sticking it out was the mistake. At the time I thought it was my obligation to keep trying to make it work. I have been happily divorced since 1998. I'm getting married this year. I need to stop reading this thread. No sex for a year? Check. Constantly belittling me? Check. No job or attempt to get a job while I work too? Check. Not bothering to clean or cook and making me do it all at the end of a double shift? Check. But what really killed it for me was I was at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. She tells me how much she hates my family, nieces, nephews, and we were never coming back. Screw that. Screw that with a 6-foot-long wooden broom handle. When you hate the person you are when with her, the thought of waking up and going to work is the most freeing feeling you've got. Also, when you see your 2-year-old son playing quietly in the corner, not wanting to see anyone after his mother and I fight over every little thing. Bad relationships have horrible consequences on kids. He's so much happier now that his parents aren't constantly screaming. I married a US Marine while I was in college. When we were dating he was my best friend. Things were fantastic. Immediately after the wedding he told me your role as a wife is to honor me and respect me. Okay, I thought that's a no-brainer of course I will. Almost immediately, as if a switch had been flicked, he became a different person. Commanding, dominant, superior. If I did something he didn't like he would scream at me, tell me how I wasn't respecting him, and verbally tear me to pieces. It wasn't long before I believed him and became a shell of the person I used to be. Verbal abuse from the person you love can, and often does, hurt you the most. This displeased him more, which turned the verbal assaults to physical ones. Still, not wanting to give up on a marriage, I suggested counseling. He refused, told me I wasn't worth it. I was stuck, miserable in my own life, not wanting to give up on us and too afraid broken to try. I didn't want to be a person who gave up too soon even though I was in shreds because the person who promised to love me forever was ruining my life. Until the night he beat me so badly I ended up in the hospital with multiple lacerations and broken bones. A friend helped me to move out of the state, back with family for a while, then though the divorce proceedings. Years of therapy and a great support system later and I'm the best I've ever been. It's the people that switch all of a sudden when you change roles that scare me. Getting married, or having kids and all of a sudden you are no longer treated the same. Mine is almost trivial in comparison to these other whammies. It sounds odd, but bear with me. We were in the car, and a song came on the radio. I was in a good mood. It was spring. The top on the convertible was down. All around lovely day. I started humming and nodding my head, and I about halfway through it, looked at my husband and said this is my favorite song lately. Without missing a beat, he reached over and immediately changed the station. I didn't think anything about it until the way back from where we were going, and then it hit me. My husband had been actively making my life miserable for years, intentionally. Anything I enjoyed, he would take away or punish me for experiencing. With this new epiphany, everything started to make sense. The constant criticism, the intense anger for something inconsequential after I'd spent time with a friend, the insults. If he really loved me, he would have let me have my happiness by keeping that stupid song on. More importantly, He hadn't changed it until I voiced that it was giving me joy. Even if I absolutely despised a song that he professed to be his favorite, I would have scrunched my nose up and dealt with it instead of turning it off. Because that's what love is sometimes. Our marriage was never happy, but I didn't realize that it was emotionally abusive until that moment in the car. What a dong. I agree it seems small compared to finding yourself in bed with someone else, but I also dated a guy once who seemed mad if I expressed happiness and it's so incredibly belittling. You kind of shut down because you get this feeling that liking something is somehow embarrassing. I hope you sing all the goddamn time now if you want to. For me it was when I accidentally heard him tell a person who was our friend I love you over the phone. I guess I got out of the shower at the wrong moment and he thought I didn't hear him. It was after that I started to notice he would go on errands for stupid crap like coffee, groceries, or office supplies at like 9 PM and come home 2-3 hours later. He did all this while I was 7-9 months pregnant and he walked out a few days after I have birth, day after my birthday. He also got to a lawyer before I did and filed for divorce the day before our 6th anniversary. Well, unfortunately, it was when I found out she was having a kid with someone else. But it should have been when I realized that her feelings didn't matter to me anymore. Habit is such an intoxicating thing it can be impossible at times to truly reflect on your own actions. The night he spent 7 hours drunkenly bitching and complaining about me. When he would get in a mood he'd turn his crap music up really loud, then attempt to sing along but make the lyrics about me. The last time he did this to me was my breaking point. I'd already started making plans to move out, but this time was just it. The next day, after I'd gotten very little sleep, I felt like I was in a daze, and I couldn't stop crying, just sobbing. I then realized I was in mourning, my marriage was over. Now, people look at me like I'm insane when I say my divorce was the best money I ever spent. I went on vacation after the divorce was final, my first solo vacation of my adult life, and it was amazing. When I realized that after 16 years, there were no longer any meaningful benefits, that is, love, trust, intimacy, teamwork, respect, companionship, etc., that justified the cost of staying, emotional abuse, emptiness, loneliness, poor relationship model for children, etc., and I would rather be alone than in such a valueless relationship. When I found the text messages to my so-called best friend, she did me a huge favor. I was already wanting out but would not leave just because I wasn't happy. Our therapist realized that my ex-wife was already cheating on me with a mutual friend, and she said you both have to stop hanging out with that guy completely until you two are back on solid ground. Ex-wife flipped out and went on a teenager-like screed about how neither me nor the therapist understand her, and that neither of us is even listening to anything she says. Her relationship with the other dude is not unhealthy. We need to focus on all the problems Roy Biggins is causing our marriage, etc. After the session, my ex-wife says we need a new therapist. She's not going back there again. Then, she suggests we have dinner with the other guy. As I was walking to dinner, I realized that this thing was probably not salvageable. When he packed his bags again, threatening to leave and deriding me as a useless piece of baggage, holding him back professionally, codependent that I was, begging him to stay had always been my previous response. That day a kind of clarity settled over me and I laughed at him and said go. Heard yesterday he's living in a van, which pretty much summarizes his entire existence after leaving us. One day, I showed up to work and my co-worker asked to speak to me. She had something she needed to tell me about my husband. She informed me that my next door neighbor, a close friend of hers, told her that my husband was going to her house during the day to smoke pot and leaving all 3 kids alone in the house, ages 6, 2 and 4 months. Definitely not old enough to be not old enough to be not old enough to be not old. She also said that our oldest would come tell him that the baby was crying and it would take him another 10 minutes before he would leave to check on her. That was the last straw for me. I put up with a lot of crap from him, but leaving our children alone to get high was unacceptable. I planned my escape over the next 3 weeks and left with the children. That was over a year ago. I'm happier now than I have been in years. I'm so proud of you for leaving him. I remember when my neighbor's oldest kid would come over to our house to tell my mom his infant sister was crying. They were all hungry, and they had no idea where their mom was. My mom practically adopted those kids, on top of being a single mom of 3 kids and being unemployed, until Cass finally decided to get off their butt. Thought we had a happy, honest relationship. Then I caught her in a lie, did some research and found she had been lying for the duration of our 2.5-year marriage. Decided I couldn't live a marriage based on lies, so I asked for a divorce. After the divorce I took some time to think about it and realized I was happier single than I ever was married. I'm glad it happened now. When she chose an overpriced bar of soap over a lifetime experience. We were staying in Venice and our first morning was spent shopping along one street instead of exploring the city. There was so much to see and do, yet all she wanted to do was poke around these few stores. I humored her for a while because it's what she wanted to do, but it got a bit silly after several hours looking in generic boutiques when there isn't anything but generic city waiting for us. She bought one thing, a small bar of soap from Lush, a store you will find in most any European city, sorta like Bath and Body Works. The bar came in a tin box. Hours later we are having coffee just around the corner from the Piazza San Marco and the sun is getting ready to set. I was hoping to take her to the top of the San Marco Campanile where we could gaze over the entire city, across the Adriatic, north to the Alps and across the Italian mainland, but she noticed her box of soap had melted during the day. She demanded we get back to Lush so she could get a new one. I told her about the bell tower. To further my point, the sun was starting to paint everything orange and there was no line to go up the tower. The moment was there, right in front of us. Yet she crossed her arms and demanded we go back to the store before it closed. I went up the bell tower. She didn't come. This event added to so much else that suggested she lived life with blinders on. She couldn't notice the small things, appreciate beauty or find joy in the world around her. It took me a while after that to go through with the divorce, but I knew that moment she refused to come with me to see that sunset. Not me, but a couple of friends. When they realized they'd financially be better off divorced. She's now a single working mother of 4. He's paying her child support. She now rents his house. They pay a lot less in income tax now. They bought a second house they rent out with the budget the whole procedure freed up. And they're still happily together. Just not officially. Not an expert or anything, but I think married couples can file taxes separately. When my parents were in a road accident on their way to visit us and afterwards they were phoning so we could help sort out getting them the rest of their way to us without a now trashed car. X says, "Can you tell them to stop calling? It's getting really annoying. Sorry, my parents' near-death accident is an inconvenience, you selfish b." Today, I've literally been sitting in my room in the Holiday Inn for 20 minutes. I've just left my spouse after 7 years. Relationship sucked. We fought over nothing every day. Couldn't have a conversation without arguing. We both felt the other should do more, but neither one of us thought we should do more cause the other person was a B and wouldn't appreciate it. Hopefully the future is brighter. When I was in labor for my daughter, our second child, he had no interest with being at the hospital with me. He spent the entire time on his cell phone trying to find a friend to bring him weed to make his night more bearable. He wouldn't walk the halls with me because that's what your mother is for. My labor was induced and very short. He had been taking a nap and was upset when he was awoken for me to push. He refused to help hold my leg up with the nurse, and after her birth he didn't want to help me get onto the stretcher to be brought to my room. The epidural hadn't worn off. Then, before I was even wheeled out of the birthing room, he announced he was leaving and took off. It was the happiest and saddest day of my life. I knew I had to leave, but I was also terrified of what he would do if he had joint custody of my kids. The 29th of March, 2015. The day a Reddit thread was the final straw and convinced at least a handful of couples to get a divorce. Probably. I keep saying I'm going to do it. I told my mom my marriage was over in the summer of 2012. I told her mom in October of 2013. I guess the fact I haven't done anything yet makes people think I'm not serious, but honestly it's a scary process to initiate. I'm afraid of losing my 3 kids. I'm afraid of losing all my money. But I really want to be happy. It wasn't the time she stabbed me with an ink pen for the second time. It wasn't the time she lied to me about going to the doctor for a pregnancy checkup and instead having an abortion of our third baby. It wasn't the time she tricked me by saying she was leaving if I didn't get a vasectomy. I was trying to save my marriage at that point, and then moving out anyways 2 months later. It wasn't because of the affair with the co-worker at the church she worked at. It was the time she kidnapped my kids from me for 2 months. I missed Father's Day and my birthday with them. That was the time I decided it was really over, and no matter what, she was not ever welcome back into our home. I didn't kick her out, she had an apartment by then. I filed the day after Father's Day. We're still in the process because of the custody fight, but it's the best thing that's ever happened to me in the marital sense. I worked days and he worked nights, so he was supposed to take care of our newborn son during the day. Unfortunately, he also had some nonsense FMLA claim that basically let him stay home 4 days out of the week to play video. I came home after a 10-hour day at my brand new high-stress job. I see that my 3-month-old son is in the playpen kicking and screaming and his face and body are bright red. My husband had his noise-cancelling headphones turned up all the way back to our son, playing LOL about a foot away. I picked up my son. My husband still hadn't even noticed I'd entered, calmed him down and put him in his crib with a bottle, then walked back into the living room and knocked my husband's monitors to the ground. When asked what the heck he was doing, he replied all he ever wants is to be picked up, and I don't have time. Deuce lowlife. As a husband and a father, and someone that loves to play video games, that guy is a freaking child and a lowlife failure. I would never put a goddamn video game above spending time with my family. When I gave her the ultimatum that it was either me and our daughter, or her friends and M, of course she chose the latter, but 6 months later she was in jail and I had full custody. When he told me he hated me and our 2-week-old baby, the finalization of my divorce was the best day of my life other than my daughter being born. The next best day was about 2 months ago when his parental rights were terminated. I did all the cooking, dishes, grocery shopping, my own laundry, took the kids to and from daycare school, and yard work, all the while holding down a job that required me to work 8-5 and then be on call through the night more often than not. I should also add that I was the primary breadwinner and bailed her butt out of debt more than I should have. She would spend insane amounts of money on dolls, boxes of refrigerator magnets, and once spent $500 on a case of shampoo from the Philippines. She once told her cousin that she didn't have a spending problem but I didn't make enough. She also worked full time and did her own and the kids' laundry until they got old enough to do their own. She also was the primary cleaner of the house when it got done. When she lost her job and was unemployed, it was an eye-opener. I would get home from work and the dishes would be piled in the sink and I would have to wash them so I could use them to make dinner. I should add that we had a dishwasher that was in good working order. I asked the kids what she did all day and they said she sat on the computer all day watching Lady Gaga videos. This went on for months and then one day I noticed that after coming home, doing dishes and making dinner, she served herself first, not our youngest child who still needed help. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I did everything, and if I'm going to do everything I might as well do it on my own. It was actually on the 2nd or 3rd day of our honeymoon. I brought up the topic of tightening our belts a little to save up for a house, and she accused me of trying to run her life. I tried to make it work for another 2 years or so, but I knew I had made a huge mistake very early on. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.